During Japan's Heian period, horrors, monsters that feed on humans, begin to appear at night at the reconstruction site of the Rajou Gate. These horrors devour the workers attempting to restore the area. Amid the chaos, Seimei, a Makai Alchemist, appears on the scene. She is an expert at easily vanquishing these malevolent entities. She is not alone in this task, as she has the help of the Golden Makai Knight, who possesses the ability to destroy the horrors. Together, they manage to halt the threat and eliminate the creatures wreaking havoc at the construction site. The incident is reported to Fujiwara no Michinaga, a powerful leader of the guard in Heian. Hintu, his subordinate, informs him of what happened, but Fujiwara shows no concern. He has full confidence in the protection provided by the Onmuryo, a magic book that safeguards his palace of light. With this powerful magical defense tool, he feels that nothing can endanger his territory. Later that day, Seimei visits a temple as part of her investigation. There, she meets Junkei, a statue carver working on a bodhisattva carving of Buddha. Junkei's goal is to insert this carving into a large Neo statue, a protective figure of the temple, in order to calm the statue's wrath and prevent it from coming to life during the night. He firmly believes that this action is necessary to avert any future danger. However, Seimei, with her vast knowledge, examines the statue and points out that it is not imbued with life, meaning there is no risk of it rising or causing trouble. This statement deeply irritates Junkei, who feels that his work is being undervalued. During the night, Raiku, a Makai Knight, and his assistant Kintoki decide to investigate the mystery behind the Neo statue and the strange occurrences at the temple. When they arrive, they discover that the statue has disappeared, heightening the concern and mystery surrounding the recent events. Meanwhile, driven by the desire to increase the power of his work, Junkei commits a terrible act. He sacrifices a woman in a ritual, hoping to empower his sculpture further. In an unexpected twist, Junkei encounters the very Neo statue that had vanished. Helpless, he is unable to escape his fate, and the statue immediately transforms him into a horror. The sacrifice he had performed had corrupted him, and now he was trapped in a monstrous form. Raiku and his young assistant Kintoki, following the trail of sacrifices, arrive at the crime scene, where they see Junkei emerging from the cave moments later. They find evidence of the sacrificed women and report it to Seimei, who decides to take drastic measures to resolve the problem once and for all. With calculated coldness, Seimei devises a plan to lure Junkei, who has transformed into a horror. At first, the young man doubts Seimei's assistance, but she outwits him with complete confidence and eventually convinces our hero. Not only is she clever, but she is also the most beautiful woman in the area, and she intends to leverage this advantage. Employing her magic and skills as a Makai Alchemist, she acts as the bait to lure the enemy. When Junkei falls into the trap, Raiku seizes the opportunity and attacks the horror, finally destroying it through his transformation as the Golden Knight. However, what seemed to be the end of the problem turns out to be just the beginning of something darker. At the end of the battle, they discover that the Neo statue was not merely a simple sculpture, as inside it was a man with a scarred face, adding a new mystery to the already complex situation. Raiku and Seimei continue to fulfill their responsibilities as protectors of the city. The plot thickens when the Guardians of the East request that they take an apprentice under their wing, Katsuragi no Hiseori, who has high aspirations of becoming a Makai Knight, aiming to be just like his father. From the beginning, Hiseori exhibits an obsessive determination to learn how to wield the Makai Knight's sword, declaring that his greatest desire is to inherit his father's armor as soon as possible. As a result of this unexpected situation, Seimei, ever cautious, begins to investigate the background of the young Hiseori. She suspects that something is not quite right. She consults Izumi Shikabu, an acquaintance, to gather more information about the apprentice. Izumi confirms that Hiseori is indeed who he claims to be and genuinely seeks to follow in his father's footsteps as a Makai Knight. Despite this confirmation, Seimei remains unconvinced about the young man's intentions and continues to keep a watchful eye on him. During the night, an unexpected event unfolds. Raiku catches Hiseori attempting to steal his sword, a sacred artifact that has been part of his lineage. Hiseori justifies his action by claiming that the sword actually belonged to his father, putting Raiku in a complicated situation. In the ensuing confrontation, the truth about Hiseori is dramatically revealed. He is not merely an apprentice, but has been possessed by a horror. Despite being possessed, he still seeks to reclaim his father's sword and insists, with absolute certainty, that it was Raiku who took his father's life to obtain it. Confusion and uncertainty cloud Raiku's judgment, leaving him unsure whether to believe the reality unfolding before his eyes. Seimei, keenly observing the situation, realizes that the Guardians of the East have orchestrated events, manipulating both her and Raiku into handling the threat posed by Hiseori, using them as mere pawns in a much larger and more dangerous plan. In the middle of this tension, Raiku's sword intervenes decisively. At first, it seems like the sword will strike our hero fatally, but he manages to convince it, as he seeks the light rather than darkness in any situation. Confused about whether to fight Hisaori or not, the sword chooses him as its rightful wielder. This recognition fills him with power and transforms him into the Golden Makai Knight. With this new strength, Raiku faces Hisaori, who has now completely turned into a horror. Even though he directs all his power at him, Raiku, thanks to the strength given by his armor, defeats him with little effort. After the battle, Seimei reveals an even darker truth. Before being possessed by the horror, Hisaori was responsible for his own father's death, a fact he had kept secret until now to avoid distracting Raiku from his mission. This information, though painful, tests Raiku's determination as a Makai Knight, forcing him to face the reality that not all the enemies he will have to defeat will be mere monsters, but also people consumed by their own inner demons. Amid the swirling political and supernatural tensions in the ancient capital, an old man steps forward before Michinaga, his voice heavy with urgency to deliver a chilling warning. Danger stalks him. As if on cue, a stray dog collapses and dies suddenly after licking a stone in the villa's pond. The abrupt death sends a shiver through the air, raising suspicions that a dark curse has been placed upon Michinaga himself. Alarmed and enraged by the ominous sign, Michinaga commands the swift and relentless capture of every onmyoji in the city, convinced that one of them is the source of this malevolent threat. Meanwhile, the elderly and respected onmyoji Abeno Haruaki investigates the situation and uncovers the grim truth. There is indeed a powerful and malevolent curse aimed at Fujiwara no Michinaga. This curse has been crafted with the sinister intent of eliminating him and opening a gateway to chaos. The arrest orders target not only minor sorcerers but also prominent figures like Seimei, a powerful and wise onmyoji, and her rival Ayashi Daimon. Both of them, known for their significant influence in the mystical world, are unwillingly caught up in the situation. Seimei and Daimon are taken into custody on suspicion of being involved in the curse. Raiku and Kintoki, initially free from suspicion, find themselves compelled to act to prove Seimei's innocence. However, Daimon, ever cunning and manipulative, turns the tide of events. During his interrogation, he accuses Minister Korchika of being the one who actually cast the curse, claiming that his motive is to eliminate Fujiwara no Michinaga, who is his powerful political rival. As accusations fly back and forth, Daimon seizes the confusion to execute a sinister plan. He uses the items confiscated by the authorities to create a portal within the complex where he is being held. This portal allows the entry of many horrors, demonic creatures that devour humans and can transform their victims into more horrors. After a fierce battle against the monster summoned by Daimon, Seimei instructs Raiku to transform into the Golden Makai Knight to defeat his enemy more quickly and effectively, as they are outnumbered by the horrors. Now clad in his armor, he unleashes his lethal power against the horrors and fiercely destroys them one by one. Despite his great power, victory is not yet assured. Despite our hero's efforts on the battlefield, unfortunately, Daimon manages to get away and escapes. This opens the door to future conspiracies against the kingdom and potentially even more complex confrontations to overcome. The protagonists will not have it easy in their next encounter. Later, after those events, Minamoto Yorinobu, son of the influential Minamoto clan, complains to his sick father. Yorinobu is frustrated and filled with resentment as he believes that the golden armor, a symbol of immense power, rightfully belongs to his family. There was a beautiful princess in the kingdom named Kaguya, whose reputation for beauty and elegance attracted numerous suitors. These noblemen, eager to win her favor, competed to present her with valuable treasures as proof of their devotion. However, one after another, these suitors began to be killed in a gruesome manner, as if the work of a monster rather than a mere assassin. The gifts they carried with them vanished without a trace. The situation quickly became a matter of interest for Raiku and Seimei, who strongly suspected that horrors were involved in the murders and set their sights on Kaguya, whom they caught red-handed in one of the killings. The investigation leads Raiku and Kintoki to join other men in an attempt to catch a glimpse of the beautiful princess, but the wait is long and tedious. Several suitors step forward to propose to Kaguya, but such hostility arises among them that chaos and violence quickly ensue. Raiku and his companion take advantage of the chaotic situation to act swiftly, deciding to take Kaguya to a safe place, fearing for her life amid the strange attacks. While fleeing, Raiku suffers an accident and loses consciousness for a brief period after falling from a high cliff. When he awakens, he finds himself in Kaguya's company, who shares the enigmatic story of her origins, Her parents told her she was born from a bamboo stalk, a revelation that leaves Raiku bewildered but even more determined to protect her. Seimei continues her investigations as usual and discovers that one of the 2 remaining suitors has been killed by a horror, who took his precious gift. With only one suitor left, Raiku and Kintoki set out to question the last survivor, Kiramachino Miko, who has been imprisoned under suspicion. However, upon arriving at the prison, they find that Miko has escaped and returned to his home. Desperate and out of control, Miko murders his own parents, leaving a bloodbath behind, and takes the family treasure, heading to Kaguya's house in a final attempt to win her favor. Raiku, Seimei, and Kintoki follow closely, fearing the worst. When they arrive, they find him threatening to kill Kaguya, consumed by a madness fueled by his obsessive love for her. Seconds away from killing her and then himself, our hero stops him. But what leaves Raiku and his assistant stunned is that neither of them were horrors. In the end, the truth comes to light. Kaguya's parents are not human but horrors who have been using their daughter as bait to lure wealthy suitors, with the intention of devouring them and seizing their treasures. Raiku, upon discovering the horrific truth, has no choice but to act. Using the power of the Golden Makai Knight, he unleashes his fury and destroys the horrors in a fierce battle. The first one is effortlessly cut in half, and the second horror also falls with little effort. Both enemies then unite for a final strike, but they pose no threat to the Golden Knight, who shatters them into pieces with a single blow of his sword. With the threat eliminated, Kaguya is devastated upon learning the truth about her supposed parents, who had found her as a child among bamboo stalks. Despite this sad outcome, she is simultaneously freed from their influence. She will no longer be under the watchful eye of our heroes, nor considered a potential horror. With the horrors destroyed, Kaguya decides to return to the place of her origin, closing the chapter on her tragic life and putting an end to the threat that loomed over her suitors. Fujiwara no Yasusuke began to develop a romantic interest in Kasode, a humble young woman caught between these 2 worlds. She had previously been unjustly accused of stealing cloth, a crime she did not commit. Despite now being in charge of her, Fujiwara had deep feelings for her, feelings that could jeopardize his position in the kingdom's aristocracy. Nevertheless, she chose to reject him and distanced herself. As events unfold, Yasusuke begins to struggle with Michinaga's inaction, the leader of the Fujiwara clan. Michinaga's indifference toward crime, particularly crimes affecting the poor, drives Yasusuke to despair. This frustration is not only political but also personal, as his closeness to Kasode compels him to take radical action. Although the aristocratic society expects him to follow the rules and maintain his status, Yasusuke dreams of a world where nobles do not exploit the less privileged. Driven to the brink after being tortured for her supposed crime, Kasode transforms into a horror. Inevitably, after her terrible experience, she falls into the clutches of this darkness. Unfortunately, her transformation into a horror makes her a target that must be exterminated by our heroes. Raiku and Seimei attempt to stop her, but the battle is not just physical, it's emotional. Kasode, once a victim, has now become a threat to everyone, but her tragedy is not forgotten. As she fights against Raiku, the memories of her pain and suffering fuel her anger. But Raiku, true to his duty as Garo, cannot allow himself to show compassion, ultimately defeating her. The scene is heartbreaking, with Kasode being freed from her suffering, but also perishing in the process. After Kasode's death, Yasusuke makes the decision to renounce his aristocratic life. Tired of the inaction of the nobles and the suffering he has witnessed, he adopts the name Hakamade, the legendary thief. Although his love for Kasode will never come to fruition, Yasusuke carries the memory of her tragic story with him, using it as fuel for his new life as a vigilante challenging the corrupt system. Daemon, the antagonist who previously escaped from the heroes, breaks an ancient seal at the Weeping Serpent Mound, releasing the horror Itsumaden. This legendary being is known as a harbinger of diseases and epidemics, and its reappearance unleashes a great evil upon the capital. Itsumaden feeds on human suffering and despair, seeking someone with the right amount of guilt and sorrow to inhabit their body and fully revive. Meanwhile, Raiku, Seimei, and Kintoki are engaged in their own tasks when they come across a young thief named Gobe. This boy is stealing items from the markets to gather money for medicine for his sick mother and younger sister. Although his intentions are noble, poverty and illness have driven Gobe to make desperate choices, even forming alliances with dangerous individuals. Upon noticing the young boy's unique ability to acquire all sorts of rare items, she sees in him a noble heart on the edge of despair. Instead of punishing him, she decides to help by giving him money so he can buy the much-needed medicine for his family. However, Raiku and Kintoki suspect that Gobe's situation is more complicated than it appears, so they decide to follow him to the hideout of the bandits he's working with. There, they discover that the gang's leader is a man named Yasusuke, now known as Hakamade. When Seimei notices that the thieves reject the boy's request to join their group, she offers him a deal. He will collect numerous rare items for her. In return, the boy will be able to provide the much-needed medicine for his mother, while Seimei will acquire various items without having to lift a finger. Meanwhile, the capital faces a sudden outbreak of an epidemic as a result of the curse unleashed by Daomon. With the western slums of Akio being the hardest hit, the plague spreads rapidly, and the sick are confined by Michinaga's orders at Rajou Gate, a last desperate attempt to prevent the disease from spreading any further. The surveillance center soon reveals to Raiku and his team that the release of Itsumaden is connected to this outbreak, confirming that the dark creature is searching for a suitable host. The situation intensifies when Daomon sets his sights on Gobei's mother, a gravely ill woman who clings to life with great effort thanks to her love for her children. Daomon sees her as the perfect host for Itsumaden, believing that her despair and suffering will make her vulnerable to the darkness of the horror. In an attempt to hasten the process, Daomon manipulates Gobei's emotions, hoping that the child's sadness will break his mother's resolve and allow Itsumaden to possess her. But the villain's efforts are in vain. Gobei's mother demonstrates remarkable determination, resisting the temptation to fall into despair and surrender to the darkness. Her desire to live, to see her children safe, is stronger than the horror's influence. Meanwhile, Raiku, having embraced his role as the Golden Knight Garo, confronts Itsumaden at Rajou Gate. The battle between our young hero and the horror is fierce, and although it initially seems that the enemy is on the verge of victory, Raiku emerges from the smoke transformed into the Golden Knight. With his sword, he defeats the enemy in a single blow, the most powerful strike ever seen. The enemy vanishes, along with the disease that had been afflicting the kingdom. Although the mother can no longer hold on and loses her life, she looks one last time at her two children, who are now safe thanks to our heroes. We find ourselves in the midst of intense events that reveal the dark and tragic past of Seimei. It all starts with Seimei's mansion under attack. The place is in ruins, clearly the work of a horror that once again possessed a man to do the dirty work. This episode introduces Fujiwara no Michinaga, who, worried about the threat of horrors already affecting the inside of the kingdom, orders Seimei to take care of the situation. She is not only surprised to realize that the noble ruler is aware of the horrors, but she also decides to help him. Seimei reluctantly agrees, but with promises of a great fortune as a reward. Meanwhile, deep in the cave, a Gru dragon, a monstrous creature, tries to awaken the horror sealed in the crystal. Seimei appears on the scene, confronting Daomon. With her characteristic sarcasm, she mocks him for trusting in ancient horrors, but the danger remains real as the enemy attempts to revive Katsurako, Seimei's mother. Raiku, meanwhile, visits the house of the guardian dog, where Inari reveals the hidden secrets of Seimei's past. We now discover that Seimei is a descendant of the powerful Kamo and Abe families and was destined to become the strongest onmyoji of her time. However, this heritage made her a target for the horrors, who saw her power as a threat to their dark plans. From a young age, she had a great ability to learn spells that easily eliminate horrors. Because of this, her grandfather locks her away in a prison to protect her, but this attempt proves to be in vain. Tragedy strikes Seimei's family when the horrors attack their home. In a heroic act, her mother, Princess Katsurako, seals the horrors inside her own body to save Seimei. Her father, equally brave, creates a crystal structure to enclose his wife along with the horrors residing within her. This heart-wrenching scene is witnessed by young Seimei, leaving a lasting mark on her. Haruaki, who witnessed these events, took the crystal and buried it in the underground cavern to keep the horrors sealed away. After hearing this story, Raiku decides to take action and asks the Shiki doll for Seimei's whereabouts. With Haruaki's help, who releases the seal of Zaruba, Raiku prepares to confront Daomon. Seimei decides to take the initiative and break the seal herself to end the matter once and for all. When Raiku arrives at the location of the Dragon Gru, Daomon controls it to attack the young hero. Meanwhile, Seimei, following Daomon's wicked plan, manages to break her mother's seal. However, in an unexpected turn, Seimei does not release the horror, but instead transforms it into a Madagu, a magical tool that can be used in battle. The fight between Raiku and the Dragon Gru reaches its climax, and Raiku finds himself at a disadvantage. However, just when everything seems lost, Seimei arrives riding a magical carriage created from the horror that was once her mother. This impressive entrance changes the course of the battle. The carriage transforms Raiku's Garokan sword into the powerful Zanbaken, a sword that finally gives him the necessary advantage to defeat the Dragon Gru. After the intense battle, Ashia Daomon escapes, taking Priest Daoma along. Although Daomon has lost this round, the threat he poses still lingers in the shadows. Seimei laughs at the hero, realizing that he cared for her, but he chuckles even more after demonstrating that he no longer needs her to become the Golden Knight. This moment of joy fades when Seimei, true to her character, seals her abilities once more, ensuring that Raiku remains reliant on her. The story begins with the unexpected attack of a horror on Minamoto no Mitsunaka, who manages to defend himself and cuts off the monster's arm before returning home. However, as we are used to seeing, the danger doesn't end there. The news of the attack causes concern for Minamoto no Yorinobu, who fears how his father, Tada no Shinbachi, will react to the situation. Determined to resolve the matter, Yorinobu seeks Seimei's help, but she has other plans in mind. She tricks Raiku into taking her place on the mission, knowing that his involvement could provoke family conflicts because of Raiku's past. Although annoyed, he decides to take on the mission anyway. When Raiku arrives at Mitsunaka's residence, Suna forbids him entry due to past tensions, as both Raiku's mother and he were exiled from the community when our hero was just a child, under false accusations. At the same time, Seimei and Kintoki, following orders from the surveillance center, decide to help Raiku, but they are soon intercepted by an alchemist spell cast by the wicked Daemon. This spell traps them, but Seimei, with her great skill, manages to free Kintoki, who continues on to the mansion. Mitsunaka begins to narrate the story behind Raiku and his mother's exile, revealing that they were banished so that the golden armor of Garo could pass to a different heir. Michinaga, an influential member of the court, had chosen Yorinobu as the legitimate bearer of the armor, further deepening the rift between the two brothers. Upon hearing this story, Yorinobu begins to understand the truth behind Raiku's resentment and his own internal conflicts. They share more similarities than they had realized. Minamoto no Mitsunaka begins to ruthlessly beat Raiku, convinced that the young man has become a horror as a means of revenge for what happened. The young man does not defend himself, but soon his young assistant, Kintoki, intervenes. He arrives at Mitsunaka's house and reveals a horrifying discovery. After activating his power to discover who is and isn't a horror, he realizes that Mitsunaka has been one of these monsters all along. The arm that Mitsunaka had severed from the horror is still possessed and has now taken control of Mitsunaka himself. The horror had not been completely destroyed. Instead, it had found a way to return, using his body to continue its plan of destruction. Raiku and Yorinobu decide to reconcile, not only to confront the threat but also because they are bound by something stronger, being brothers. However, when the situation reaches a breaking point, Seimei arrives at the scene with her Madu cart, a powerful vehicle infused with magic, and releases the golden armor of Garo just in time to defeat the enemy. Now empowered by the armor, Raiku engages in a fierce battle against the horror that possessed Mitsunaka. After finally defeating it, Daemon chooses to retreat, but not before smiling, as he now knows the true origin of Raiku, and can use it against him in the future, seeing a weakness in the young hero for the first time. At the end of the episode, both brothers have a peaceful conversation, and Raiku suggests that Yorinobu continue his life as an aristocrat while he maintains the peace of the kingdom with his golden armor. In a flashback, a young Seimei fights a horror she summoned to practice her magic as an alchemist sorceress. She soon encounters Priest Dauma, who rescues her from poverty because he sees great potential in her. He takes her in, recognizing her as the abandoned granddaughter of Abe Haruaki. After this flashback, while Kintoki and Seimei are arguing, Raiku arrives to warn them of an imminent danger. A new horror has appeared, like a black hole. This horror absorbs all the light, so our heroes decide to summon the golden armor to generate light and reveal this troublesome enemy. The power of the horror is so strong that it even manages to absorb the characteristic color of the armor, but Raiku soon lands a blow that manages to stop it. However, the problems do not end there, as our hero is now greatly weakened. After a deep sleep, the young man wakes up with a big appetite. Now Raiku's attitude has changed completely. Not only does he make fun of Seimei, but he also tries to flirt with an aristocrat on the street using crude words. Then, seeing a fight from a distance, he decides to jump in, causing a lot of trouble. Seimei, always doubtful about what's happening, decides to consult the council to understand what occurred with our hero's golden armor, as it absorbed a significant amount of darkness. Later, we see how Raiku tries to collect money in a different way. While watching Masamune attempting to court another woman who is not his wife, our hero threatens to expose him. This is how he manages to gather large amounts of money with little effort, but through blackmail, something that quickly troubles Kintoki. Realizing that his ally needs to be exorcised of the darkness he absorbed, Seimei decides to tie him up to buy time and plan a strategy. In this case, she decides to turn to someone completely unexpected, as she seeks the help of Priest Dauma once again, who was formerly her disciple. However, for this task, she first has to deal with Daemon, who treats her with sarcasm, The elder manages to give her the answer she was looking for as Dauma seeks to test her. Meanwhile, Raiku breaks free and escapes from Kintoki's watch. Taking advantage of the situation, Dauma follows Raiku's trail to try to defeat him now that the young man is vulnerable. Soon, Seimei and Kintoki arrive to help their friend, and Seimei summons the golden armor, now darkened, to save Raiku's life, even if it means risking her own. It seems difficult at first, as the possessed Raiku bites Seimei to make her let go, but thanks to her powers, she manages to save him and completely exorcises the darkness, returning him to normal. He soon wakes up to find Kintoki crying over his return, unaware of everything that had happened. He doesn't know it, but his friends saved the day. We see an old man on the verge of death, praying to Buddha, but he is soon interrupted by Dauma, who sees in this dying man an opportunity to plant ideas in his mind and turn him into a horror. Despite his convictions, Dauma ultimately convinces him to become a monster, choosing not to die before fulfilling his desires. The next day, our heroes head to a mansion to understand what has happened, as someone has left destruction everywhere, and the protagonists believe it may be the work of a horror. After waiting for the enemy to return to the crime scene, Raiku and Kintoki camouflage themselves as statues. The enemy soon appears, prompting our hero to pursue him relentlessly. His bravery is evident, but it also shows a lack of cooperation with his teammates, which could be fatal in such a dangerous situation. Being unprotected without his golden armor, carrying just a sword won't be enough. When it seems like the enemy is about to deliver a fatal blow, the young man suddenly disappears. Kintoki arrives at the scene, confused about where his friend is, and worst of all, he must face the horror alone, which outmatches him in size and strength. What's surprising now is that Raiku hasn't gone anywhere. Instead, he has somehow shrunk and now looks up at the others as giants. After throwing Kintoki into the air, the horror causes our now tiny hero to fall downstream, while the antagonist takes the opportunity to escape. That same night, the young assistant arrives home to inform Seimei that Raiku has disappeared, but to their surprise, he arrives home the next day riding a turtle. Although he is now safe, the problem has not been resolved. He remains shrunken. Seimei soon realizes that it wasn't just Raiku who was shrunk, but also the others who are in the destroyed mansion. Now the next question arises, where are they? At night, Yorinobu goes to the home of the elderly monk after hearing rumors that he is confined to bed. After a conversation, the old man begins to feel unwell and heads to another room. This strange behavior alarms the young man, and when he curiously follows him into the room, he discovers that the monk Jihu is feeding on small people trapped inside a jar. He uses them as food to gain that great power as a horror. Once discovered, he reveals his true form as a monster and attacks Yorinobu, who, after the enemy reduces his sword, decides to escape. When our heroes head back home to think of a plan, they encounter Yorinobu on the way, who explains what has happened and reveals the whereabouts of the horror that was causing all those problems. Later, they come up with a strategy to catch the great monk Jihu red-handed, deciding to dress up as the perfect bait. The enemy makes an appearance, and Seimei throws the shrunken Raiku at the horror, who devours him in one bite. Although it seems all hope is lost, everything goes according to plan. Now inside the enemy's stomach, our hero manages to transform into the Golden Knight and uses his sword to slice through and finally break the spell that shrinks them all, including Raiku. Yorinobu, witnessing this sad outcome, laments not being able to help his father and the monk, but still thanks his brother for his assistance. Hakamade, now a thief in the capital, attends a meeting with another notorious aristocrat thief, Tenkeimaru, the big boss, who controls the thieves of the old southern part of the capital. After entering the hideout, he is questioned by this mysterious figure. One night, the thieves under Hakamade's command attempt to rob the aristocrats, but their plans are foiled when a mysterious figure stops them all using a Kemari ball. This, of course, leaves the notorious thief very furious, prompting him to seek out the person responsible. He gets an idea of who it might be because of that distinctive ball, but he needs to see it with his own eyes to find out for sure. Soon, when Hakamade goes to meet him, he realizes that the one who has been thwarting his plans all this time is Naramichi, his old friend who supposedly died from a pandemic many years ago. The thief, far from being surprised by this encounter, begins to interrogate him. Soon, this old friend shows his true form, and now transformed into a fearsome horror, he starts throwing the balls at his opponent. When the enemy is about to defeat him with just one attack, unexpectedly the Golden Knight comes to his help. The horror sees that he has no chance and flees. Later, they talk about what happened, and Raiku tries to ask Yasusuke questions to find out the whereabouts of the horror. He reacts negatively, considering our hero very annoying, and rejects his help. During a previous event, we see how the great leader of the thieves, Tenkeimaru, gives his Mackai weapon and bracelet to Hakamade, intending to pass on his position. Later that same night, he encounters his old friend again and asks what led him to become a horror. This time, he confesses why he chose to turn to the dark side, because of his lower social standing in the aristocracy. Before dying from the illness caused by the pandemic, he decided to become a horror. Yasusuke believes that these are not sufficient reasons for making such a decision, which unleashes Naramichi's anger. The aspirations of this enemy dissipate, as thanks to the great thief, Yasusuke is able to wield his sword, which grants him Makai Knight powers. Despite his enemy's efforts to inflict a fatal blow, he cannot overcome the Makai armor and is ultimately defeated. His future opponent is illuminated by the light of the moon. Raiku immediately understands that he now has a potential adversary. Now with immense power in his hands, Yasusuke is capable of invoking the Makai armor at any moment he wishes, giving him a great advantage over our protagonist, who will always need Seimei's help. Raiku invites him to join forces to help the people, but Yasusuke disagrees, telling him that he will use the armor for his own benefit. Later, Fujiwara no Michinaga summons a meeting with Yasusuke to make him a proposal, as he intends to appoint him as a warrior of the Palace of Light, to eliminate the horrors that are in the capital. Obviously, he chooses to refuse, as he will dedicate his time to eliminating the horrors and protecting humans without needing to be under their orders. Meanwhile, after learning that a gate is being raised in the capital to prevent more creatures from entering the city, Daomon and his disciple are plotting a strategy to attack and disrupt Michinaga's plans. To carry out this plan, the old man will make use of a device shaped like a die. Back in the city, the construction of the raised gate is complete, and only Abe no Haruaki's help is needed to place the final seal. Michinaga asks his subordinate to demonstrate the function of the gate, and immediately it shines, leaving everyone in awe. However, this demonstration only brings trouble, as a horror appears on stage. This monster is gigantic and is literally atop this new building, ready to smash it, as it still lacks the protection of Haruaki Abe's seal. It's the perfect opportunity for Daomon to deal a heavy blow to the capital, and further his intentions of completely eliminating the horrors. Not far from that place, Daomon once again induces dark desires in one of the kingdom's subordinates who hates Haruaki Abe. Suddenly, everything turns chaotic at the foot of the new gate, and although the kingdom's soldiers use their weapons against the horror, they are no match for such evil. Raiku, despite not having his armor, tries to confront his enemy, but Daomon shows no mercy. Just in time, Seimei arrives to save our heroes, and Raiku invokes the armor of the Golden Knight once more. Without a second thought, he begins to slice his enemy into pieces. Our hero finds this task difficult, as at the same time he must cut down the enemy, he must also prevent more innocent lives from being on the brink of death. In the long run, this becomes impossible. Seimei orders Raiku to first defeat Daomon in order to finally vanquish the giant horror. But his enemy is much stronger and manages to leave him unconscious and without the knight's armor activated. Now our hero finds himself defenseless, and only Seimei will be the last hope to save the kingdom. She faces a difficult decision, as she must choose between saving Raiku from dying at the hands of the enemy, or letting the horror fall and allowing many villagers and members of the kingdom to perish. Seimei doesn't think for long and decides to save the young man. Tragedy is imminent, and Daomon laughs at witnessing such a disaster. An emissary informs Michinaga that the raised gate, which took days to build, was completely destroyed, but the evil did not reach the capital. Raiku looks at those affected by the tragedy and blames himself for not being able to save them. Because of this, he demands that Abe remove the seal from his ring so he can summon the Golden Knight's armor at will. But the old man refuses to do so, explaining that Raiku is too emotional and would be willing to risk his own life to save others, ruining everything. It's not a wise decision. As they are talking, a horror attempts to assassinate Abe, but he deceives it just in time, managing to escape certain death. This horror is not alone, as dozens more threaten the lives of our heroes. Seimei tries to activate Raiku's knight armor, but her low vital energy prevents her from doing so. Meanwhile, at the palace, Michinaga asks Yasunori for a favor and inquires whether the Palace of Light will be a safe place. However, we must remember that this old man was seduced by darkness and turned into a horror by Daomon, making it impossible for him to contain himself as he gradually reveals his true form. When everything seemed dire, the situation becomes even more disastrous as this horror begins attacking the soldiers of the capital. It is not an ordinary monster like the others, as it possesses powers that are difficult to repel. While the enemy literally slaughters the entire court, Daomon watches from a distance, unsatisfied with the amount of death plaguing the capital. He wants everything to sink into absolute darkness. One of the subordinates steps away from Michinaga for a moment and goes to Yasusuke, who is imprisoned. Obviously, to deal with this disaster, they will need his help to use his Makai Knight armor. At the same time, a major battle is about to begin as Seimei encounters Daumon. After mocking him with sarcasm, she plans an attack strategy. Before this happens, Daumon's ally arrives to rescue him. At first, she feels scared due to her usual fear of butterflies or any similar insect, but she understands that she must face her deepest fears. Miraculously, Yasusuke arrives to save her, transformed into a Makai Knight. Raiku and his brother try to fend off the horrors that continue to threaten the capital, and he wonders why Seimei chose to save him instead of the dozens of villagers who died because of the horror summoned by Daumon. His brother brings him to his senses, explaining that the reason is Seimei has feelings for our hero. He encourages him, and although many have perished, Raiku will continue to save more and more lives in the future. Soon, they find themselves surrounded by numerous monsters, while the Silver Makai Knight tries to defeat the insect-like horror. Just as Seimei is about to receive a fatal blow, a vivid memory of the first time she met Raiku comes to her, along with recollections of everything they've been through together. Daumon, taking advantage of this moment of vulnerability, tries to implant false memories to make her falter, but she quickly realizes this and strikes back. While she fights with all her strength, our hero, filled with determination, manages to break the seal on his own. Now, in his true form, with just one attack, he wipes out all the horrors present. With newfound resolve, he heads towards Seimei, and together with Yasusuke, they manage to finally defeat the antagonist summoned by Daumon. Seimei then begins to strike the sorcerer, but he is saved by his master just in time. A new character is introduced, who, through a special power, can order others to be killed and also murders with his own hands in cold blood. The next day, Raiku reflects sadly on what happened during the previous events, but Kintoki quickly brings him back to his senses, and our hero regains his focus. However, something unexpected occurs. A white fox spirit appears in front of the two, calling them to head to the center of the Guardians. Kintoki is anxious, as it is his first time being called to this sacred place. Meanwhile, in the now ruined city, Yorinobu is helping those affected by the massive invasion of horrors. He then begins to discuss what happened with his brother and also introduces Tsutsumi Yohana, an aristocratic woman who offers to help the most disadvantaged. In a cart, Torudono appears in the distance in a suspicious manner, and according to Yorinobu, the other aristocrats disregard him due to his reputation as a womanizer. Once again, during the night, this mysterious aristocrat with horror powers is seen seducing a young woman, whom he kisses before killing her in seconds. The news quickly reaches Michinaga, who discusses the situation with his subordinates. Many girls are disappearing, and the incident originated just a few days ago. Our heroes, putting the pieces together and realizing that Toru is the one causing these deaths, intercept him at night. However, they did not expect that the prey this horror was seeking is Reiku's brother, whom he finds more attractive than the women of the court, and he takes him away. The others are completely shocked, and Raiku, even more so due to his naivety, cannot understand the situation. Now in his hideout, Yorinobu interrogates the villain to uncover why he sold his soul to darkness. The true reason is Toru's insecurity about aging, with the only way to reverse this being to consume anyone with exceptional beauty. Just as he is about to devour him with lustful eyes, our hero arrives to save him. He manages to slash Toru's face with his sword, but Toru quickly regenerates and even turns Yorinobu against him. However, when the tide of battle turns against the villain, he reveals his true form as a horror, and Raiku decides to invoke his Makai Knight armor. It's not easy, as the enemy puts up a fierce fight, but our hero outsmarts him. The battle doesn't end there. After the moon turns red, the antagonist unleashes unimaginable power. Despite this, he is no match for Reiku's determination and ferocity, who, in a final effort, delivers a fatal blow that takes Toru out of the fight. Although the enemy has been defeated, the mystery of why the moon has turned crimson still remains. Several members of the aristocracy gather to remember Professor Yasunori Dono, who, as we know, was consumed by darkness under Daumon's spell. They recite poems and mourn his passing, but at one point, Masamune tries to charm a new maid at the court. He is quickly caught in the act by his wife. Faced with this situation, he turns to a friend for advice, who suggests that he start seeing his wife in a new light. To keep a close watch on him, this friend also hires Raiku and Kintoki. Initially, the young man refuses, given his commitment to fighting monsters, but Izumi persuades him by pointing out the large debt he still owes her for the information she provided earlier. As a result, both of them now have no choice but to fulfill her request. Later, Masamune's wife starts scolding him for everything he does wrong. He mismanages the finances, skips court meetings, and harasses the maids. She reminds him that he used to be a man of pride and principles, far from what he is now. She wants him to improve, but furious inside, he fantasizes about telling her he wants a divorce, imagining she would stab him in response. Cowardly, he doesn't say a word and slowly walks away. Meanwhile, our heroes have no choice but to travel with this lecherous man in a carriage. He suddenly changes his plans, deciding to visit a relative. He meets with his young niece, whom he hasn't seen in a while, and without hesitation, tries to make inappropriate advances. Raiku gets angry, but Kintoki advises him not to intervene, as it could make things worse. The girl runs into her mother's arms, who storms in to teach the perverted uncle a lesson. But things take an unexpected turn when Masamune tries to flirt with the girl's mother too, making the situation even worse. He is simply hopeless. When they all return home, the young men are bombarded with questions by Masamune's wife. They answer out of fear of this intimidating woman, leading to Masamune being kicked out of the house. He once again seeks advice from Izumi. Angered, he accuses Raiku and Kintoki of betrayal for telling the truth, which enrages them. They corner him against the wall in complete fury. Izumi quickly steps in to calm them down and tries to come up with a plan to fix the situation. That's why the three of them are now forced to sleep together in one room, much to everyone's discontent. Masamune falls asleep in seconds. Our heroes get distracted for a moment and step outside. But when they return, the man has vanished and decides to stalk a woman from the court. He is immediately taken aback to find that the woman has been murdered. The authorities declare him one of the main suspects, and he realizes that he must defend his honor in this situation. He promises Izumi that he will face the issue and also win back his wife. These words of determination end up captivating her, and for the first time, she sees him as a man and prevents him from leaving the room. In another episode, Hakamada and his gang of thieves are back in action, once again targeting the high nobility. They promise not to kill, as it's the code of the gang. Their only interest is in stealing. Soon, they realize they've arrived at the worst possible time, as a horror is present, murdering its latest victim. However, the monster quickly learns that it made a big mistake killing on that day, because Hakamada activates his Makai Knight armor and defeats it instantly. The other thieves are unaware of what happened, and their leader orders them to carry on with the task of looting the house. The next day, the authorities are on high alert and plan to capture the thieves for what took place, as they are not only guilty of the robbery but also now accused of murder. Later, he is questioned by his brother, who is in charge of the kingdom's security, and asks if he was the one who caused the trouble. After a brief argument, his brother concludes that there isn't enough evidence to imprison him and leaves. During the night, one of the kingdom's subordinates encounters Daumon, who entices him to seize control of the realm and overthrow Michinaga. Succumbing to the manipulation, his eyes turn red, transforming him into yet another horror threatening the kingdom. Now resolute, he begins terrorizing the impoverished. Hakamada overhears the chaos and sees his brother defending the downtrodden, but Kinto accuses him of being in cahoots with the thieves. This prompts the antagonist to point at Yasumasa and order his soldiers to execute him for defying authority. Yasumasa stands his ground, and just as he is about to be struck down, his brother intervenes in time, joining the fray. Realizing they've walked into a trap, and with the situation stacked against them, they retreat, leaving a smoke bomb behind. Both of them now need to think of a plan, and they decide to infiltrate the police magistracy to recover key evidence that accuses Kinto. After knocking out a few guards, they manage to get to the bottom of the matter, and inside the magistracy, they find a secret door that leads them to discover what they were looking for. That's why later Yasumasa meets with Michinaga, who is enjoying the Great Crimson Moon with the others. The enemy tells his soldiers to attack, but Michinaga stops them because he wants to hear what our hero has to say. He hands over some documents proving that Kinto was killing other aristocrats to rise to power, and he also keeps the swords and belongings of his victims as trophies. He invites Michinaga to see what he's talking about with his own eyes, and the enemy, realizing he is cornered, shows his true form. Everyone flees, but Yasusuke arrives just in time, and now, with his Makai Knight armor, he will be a worthy opponent for this envious horror. Despite looking threatening, he is defeated instantly. Everything returns to normal, and Yasumasa regains his honor. Raiku keeps fighting to get rid of as many horrors as he can, but soon he and Kintoki start worrying about what's going on with the moon, which is getting redder, a sign that something bad is coming. Suddenly, something different happens. A symbol appears on the moon, similar to the one Seimei used in her attacks. Things get even worse when Daumon starts killing members of the aristocracy. While he's absorbing the soul of one of his victims, a powerful force strikes and stops him. It's Seimei, who we haven't seen in a while, and she's the only one who can stand up to him. Daumon has a trick up his sleeve, though, as a horror appears behind her. Taking advantage of the distraction, the sorcerer tries to escape, and Seimei goes after him. But that's impossible, since the monster attacks her without mercy. She gets beaten badly, and without the power of the Makai Knight armor, there's almost no way she can win on her own. This situation calls for teamwork. Luckily, Raiku and Kintoki are right there and step in to help. With the power they bring, they defeat the enemy in seconds. Once again, they see that this horror, just like the others, releases embers that float up to the moon, feeding it and making it even redder. Seimei watches them from where she's hiding, wounded. At her most vulnerable moment, she starts to remember what happened in her life. She always ends up alone. The only light she ever had was Raiku, but now she realizes it was just temporary. Exhausted, she falls to the ground, but moments later, her grandfather saves her. In her dreams, she is stalked by an enemy, completely defenseless and unable to do anything about it. The figure threatening her is enormous, but its true face hasn't been revealed yet. Seimei wakes up frightened, and her grandfather approaches to check on her. He takes her to a hidden place in the ancient mountain, leading her into a deep cave where the old man spends his time closely watching the crimson moon and its changes. He tells his granddaughter about the moon's origin and how, in some way, it serves as a last hope to defeat the horrors. But that wasn't the only reason for bringing Seimei there. In a moment of distraction, Abe immobilizes her, intending to exorcise the darkness inside her. But he fails, as the power residing within the sorceress is much stronger than he anticipated. She fights back and strikes him hard, regretting it moments later when she snaps out of her possessed state. She leaves the place and, in anger, sets out to confront Daumon, seeking revenge. They were expecting her, as it had all been planned from the start. Not only is Daumon there, his master stands by his side. She wants to obtain the key to break the moon's seal, but to complete her mission, she must defeat the sorcerer. Both fight using their full potential, and just when it seems like she is about to win, her enemy takes advantage of a brief distraction to summon a spear, striking her with a fatal wound. He then inflicts more injuries, leaving her on the ground. As the sorcerer plans to kill her once and for all, his master has other intentions for her, believing she could be turned against the Makai Knights in the future. A conflict quickly arises because the two disagree on their plans. While one wants to follow a strategy, the other seeks only darkness and destruction. Daumon attacks his master, but the strike is swiftly dodged. When Master Daumon thinks he has everything under control, his disciple unleashes an attack that envelops and eliminates him instantly. Not only does this happen, but it also triggers the true power of the Crimson Moon, summoning Rudra. The Guardians share the story of a demon named Rudra, who was the most powerful enemy millennia ago, even before the rise of the capital. This demon was impossible to defeat, so he was sealed under a spell within the moon. Now, thousands of years later, the fact that the moon has turned crimson is the first sign of his return. There is still hope, as this fearsome monster has not yet been resurrected, giving our heroes time to come up with a strategy to prevent total chaos on Earth. The Guardians then entrust Raiku with the task of eliminating the enemy, because if this being awakens, it would mean the final destruction of the capital. In other matters, Yorinobu is now appointed as the head of the police magistrate. This young man apologizes to the people, whom he had recently mistreated due to the string of thefts and murders plaguing the capital. Now, the head of the magistrate and those who accompany him bow before the citizens. His new initiative is to work together with both the populace and the ruling powers, namely the nobility and their allies. When least expected, a red storm begins to lash the city, summoned by Seimei, who is under the mental control of her curse. Is she, like Daumon, obsessed with destroying everything? Yorinobu sees her as suspicious and relentlessly pursues her, but despite his courage, he is no match for her, and Seimei knocks him out with a single punch. Our heroes come up with a plan to finally take down Daumon. The King of Thieves encounters him during the night while the enemy is lurking, ready to absorb any victim who crosses his path. Yasusuke could use his Makai Knight armor to face such a foe, but his pride pushes him to rely on his sword instead. It's not easy to fight this way against Daumon, whose spells seem endless, making it hard for the young warrior to improvise. The next night, they finally get a chance to face the malevolent sorcerer. In a state of unconsciousness, Seimei appears before the others and tells Raiku that she has wanted to meet him for a long time. This means that all the memories shared with our protagonist are currently wiped away. The heroes are in great danger as they now face a relentless opponent. Without warning, Raiku starts taking several hits, struggling to defend himself, especially since the attacks are coming from someone who once meant so much to him. He can only focus on defending and dodging. With no other choice, he feints as if to draw his sword, but is stopped by Kintoki, who doesn't fully grasp the situation but knows the last thing he wants is for his friend to kill Seimei. In an attempt to protect him, the young assistant steps forward to attack, but is quickly overpowered. He is also seriously injured, which enrages Raiku. He realizes there can be no mercy against his old friend. What follows is a brutal fight. The fight pauses when a young girl emerges. She walks over to Kentoki and heals his injuries, sensing a threat from her arrival. Both Daumon and Seimei decide to withdraw from the battle for the time being. The girl who surprised everyone earlier is the creation of a wizard, who conjured her to seal Rudra when he eventually emerges. Confused, Raiku approaches Abe for clarification. Now in his chambers, the old man explains that in order for this being with immeasurable power to be resurrected, it needs a vessel. The young man slowly realizes that to eliminate Rudra, he must also eliminate Seimei, who longs to be the vessel for this horror. Both understand that this is a cruel task, but it must be done to prevent ultimate disaster. However, there's still a glimmer of hope, as there is a way to save Seimei while also sealing Rudra, although it will take significant time to develop that strategy. Before leaving, Abe asks Raiku to look after Kaguya for a moment. Once again, the Guardians urge our hero to attack Seimei and eliminate the enemy, even though this conflicts with the young man's personal interests. During the night, Kaguya manages to settle into her new home, while Kentoki suggests to Kaoru that she is a charming young woman. However, Kaoru maintains his worried expression, concerned about the danger Seimei will face when she must make a decision. All the compliments from the young assistant have no effect on Kaoru. Back in the capital, a subordinate warns Michinaga about the storms ravaging the city, explaining that citizens are fearing the end times, with both aristocrats and commoners reacting this way, as everyone is caught up in the same problem. Despite pleas for him to issue a statement, Michinaga retreats to his chambers to contemplate what is happening, deciding not to say a word for now. He has better plans that remain unknown. As he proceeds with a risky move, he summons Daumon for a meeting. Both are flattered to meet. Michinaga first asks why Daumon killed his master, then proposes forming an alliance and creating a plan together, seemingly capturing the attention of someone who needs it now more than ever. He suggests that they are not so different from one another, although one represents darkness and the other light. They both need each other, as they are, after all, brothers. This is the reason he wants them to rule together to ultimately save the capital. Just as the deal is about to be finalized, Daumon has a last-minute change of heart, refusing because his intentions are tied to darkness, the opposite of what Michinaga offers. Michinaga accepts the rejection calmly, but as Daumon leaves the scene, his face is filled with concern. What other resources does he have left to avoid succumbing to darkness? During the following night, Raiku is guided by one of the spells cast long ago by Seimei, one of his most loyal allies. The young man seeks to interrogate her and demand explanations, but the first reaction of this now possessed Seimei is to attack immediately. She mocks our hero, and he comes to the conclusion that he must not lose sight of his goal. He is not fighting Seimei. His true opponent is Rudra himself. This is why he decides to invoke the Golden Makai Knight armor. Now he takes his objective seriously, which is why Seimei relentlessly uses her abilities, yet our hero manages to dodge these attacks with his power. Rudra acknowledges that he is facing a worthy opponent. Meanwhile, Raiku does everything possible to land a decisive blow. Rudra is cunning, but Raiku maintains pressure with his relentless assaults. He may achieve his goal. Just as he is about to kill her, Kaguya steps between the two opponents, preventing the outcome everyone feared, Seimei's death. As a result, she decides to flee the scene, her body exhibiting reactions she cannot control. A part of Seimei has not completely vanished, meaning she could still return to normal. Hope is not yet lost, as the Guardians now summon Yasusuke, who is also tasked with killing Seimei to prevent the disaster posed by Rudra's resurrection. Now that he has no other choices, Michinaga decides to meet up with Raiku. Time is running out, so his subordinates hurry to make it happen. However, on their way, Seimei emerges as an obstacle that can't be easily bypassed, especially now with the immense power bestowed by Rudra. At first, Yasumasa tries to defuse the situation, but after realizing that the person before him isn't truly Seimei, but an imposter, he draws his sword and prepares for action. She is ruthless, and her swift actions prove it, as she slashes her enemy's chest within seconds. News of Yasumasa's death soon spreads throughout the court, and the one who suffers the most from this loss is Yorinobu, his closest partner. He quickly learns who committed such a brutal act, and a renewed fury burns in his eyes. But it is Hakamade who bears the brunt of this anger, as he takes one last look at his brother. Now, taking down Seimei becomes personal for him, and with his Makai Knight armor, he has a strong chance of defeating her. The opponents face each other once again, and this time Yasusuke strikes first. However, our hero rushed too quickly in his attempt to defeat her, as she unleashes a power that sends him flying away. Raiku warns him that fighting a battle with hatred in his heart is a bad idea, as it could lead him into darkness. But Yasusuke doesn't care and continues his mission to try and kill Seimei. Things get serious when he decides to call upon his Makai Knight armor to unleash his full potential against her. However, he is soon stopped by Raiku, now wearing his Golden Knight armor. Just as Seimei is about to counterattack, she is stopped by Daumon, who realizes it would be a lost cause to fight against two Makai Knights at once. The two characters now engage in a sword duel, as they have different intentions regarding Seimei. Yasusuke wants to kill her, while our hero is determined to prevent this at all costs. The winner is Raiku, who disarms his opponent, and Yasusuke accepts his defeat with pride. He then promises not to lay a hand on Seimei. In return, Yasusuke asks him to take full responsibility for resolving the situation once and for all, and to stop the massacre that will occur if Rudra is resurrected. The next day, Michinaga invites Raiku to a meeting and assigns him the task of eliminating Daumon. However, our hero refuses, as he is forbidden from carrying out this mission. Makai Knight armor bearers are only allowed to eliminate horrors, not humans. The nobleman doesn't press the matter further and instead invites the young knight to leave. The next night, our heroes manage to come up with a plan to catch Rudra, and once they succeed, they start preparing to exorcise her. The ritual begins, and Raiku enters a spell cast by the Elder. Now inside that mist-filled place, our hero finds himself in a place where Seimei is being held captive. She finally regains consciousness, but soon the memories of her actions while being possessed by Rudra come back, and she feels remorse. Her suffering doesn't last long, as she is rescued by the young man. She quickly resorts to using the Golden Knight armor to confront Rudra. After both of them combine their powers, they finally manage to defeat this powerful horror. On the other hand, Kintoki and Daumon fight in a merciless battle to buy enough time for the spell to finish. Just when it seems the little assistant is about to die, Yorinobu arrives just in time. Also joining the fight against evil are the Guardians, who take Daumon out of the game. Finally, they begin the final preparations to exorcise Seimei. It seems to have worked because she regains consciousness, but now they will pay a high price for that decision, as it is the Elder Abe who becomes the vessel for Rudra. In an emotional scene, the young woman's grandfather fills her with motivation and determination to face the situation ahead of her. She cries inconsolably while her allies remain silent. This could be part of the family curse, considering that her parents were cursed, and now it is her grandfather who must accept the curse to save his granddaughter. Despite this, Seimei is now safe from the darkness that was looming over her, and she will finally be able to defeat Daumon, who no longer has any allies. When Kintoki and Yorinobu think they have finally defeated Daumon, the villain gets up as if nothing had happened, even though he was literally struck by lightning. He claims that it's not enough power to defeat him, asserting that he is an enemy of immense strength. Although the battle seems very risky for our heroes, due to their limited powers as humans, they decide to fight with determination. As usual, when he knows the situation is against him, Daumon chooses to escape using a special spell. While Seimei says goodbye to her grandfather, Daumon teleports to where the others are gathered and uses a spell to manipulate Abe's body, of which he is now the owner. Because of this oversight, the villain now has an advantage, and his plans will continue now that Rudra is once again in his hands. Seimei tries to contain him with a spell, but Daumon quickly escapes this trap by cutting off his arm. Without wasting time, the villain begins to curse the Elder's body, plunging it into total darkness to summon Rudra again. The sacrifice of Abe and everyone else could be in vain. The final preparation is underway, as the Dark Sorcerer uses the die that his master had created for the occasion. Thus, he forces Rudra to awaken from his eternal sleep. Daumon not only promises to snuff out the light of the capital, but his intentions go even further, to destroy the entire planet. Now, a gigantic monster rises from the moon, and everyone witnesses this terrifying scene. This monster is enormous, and everyone runs for their lives. It has countless limbs and 3 faces that stare fixedly at its targets. Michinaga watches the situation with composure while everyone screams in absolute fear. He promises that the monster will not reach the Palace of Light. Seimei takes the initiative to try to destroy this gigantic being. Kintoki asks what they could do about it and what strategy could be used to stop this chaotic creature. The sorceress suggests they figure it out on the fly as everyone heads toward their goal. Daumon offers himself to this enemy, and Rudra quickly ingests him. This monster shows no mercy and begins attacking the entire city. Hundreds of citizens die in the process, and the danger soon reaches the Palace of Light, where Michinaga and the other members of the aristocracy are located. They do not let anyone in. Yorinobu approaches the entrance and asks why this is happening, One of the court's subordinates responds that the most humble people are forbidden to enter the palace. Outraged, the young man heads toward Michinaga, seeking answers. He kneels and begs him to temporarily allow people to enter the palace. Coldly, the minister refuses this request. He offers Yorinobu the option to stay in the palace, if he wishes, as a way to save his life. The young man looks him in the eyes and thinks he is insane. Meanwhile, Rudra wreaks havoc in the capital. When it seems that all is lost, our heroes arrive on the scene. Raiku vows to cut down the enemy and immediately invokes the golden armor. Despite the antagonist's enormous size, the young man manages to get close and strike at its weak points, cutting off one limb at a time. The monster reacts instantly, and Seimei casts a spell aimed at one of its faces. It may be huge and possess multiple powers, but teamwork could be their last chance to win. This final move fills our heroes with determination. At least one of their plans to attack the enemy has worked perfectly, and they can try other strategies. Things become complicated when one of the arms Raiku previously cut off gains a life of its own and attempts to attack Kintoki. He runs in fear from this giant hand threatening his life, and just as he is about to succumb, he is rescued by his friend. Seimei, now thinking of another strategy, summons her mother, who, as we recall, is a cart with a lion's head. Although this being may seem harmless, it inflicts significant damage on the enemy and distracts him, allowing Raiku to plan a decisive attack. In the capital, Yorinobu orders the gates to be opened so that the population can take refuge temporarily. Realizing what has happened, that his order has been denied, Michinaga repeatedly bangs his head against the wall, leaving a pool of blood on the floor. The furious minister orders that Yorinobu be eliminated for breaking his direct orders not to open the palace doors. Deep down, Michinaga feels contempt for the common people, and that resentment grows even more now that he must face them inevitably. Still, he ultimately decides to say a few words to maintain the general calm. He assures everyone that the Golden Knight currently fighting the monster is his confidant and ally. In this way, everyone applauds the minister. Now coordinated, both heroes in their Mackai armor move forward to attack the enemy. It won't be an easy task, as Rudra does everything possible to keep them from getting close. Even so, they manage to inflict a lethal wound on its faces. In revenge, Rudra starts absorbing the souls of those in the capital, devouring dozens within seconds to regenerate the injuries inflicted by our heroes. Seimei tries to cast a spell to contain the beast, allowing both opponents to fight without the risk of their enemy regenerating after a lethal attack. Raiku and Yasusuke give their all to eliminate Rudra. This cooperation proves highly effective, as the Golden Knight manages to cut away a part that will leave the enemy completely vulnerable, severing Daomon's body, which was fused with the beast. Just when everyone thinks the fight is won, the sorcerer reappears in the same spot seconds later, regenerating himself. Separating Daomon from the horror's body won't be that simple. The heroes don't stand idly by and continue dismembering and slicing off its limbs. However, more problems arise as wearing the armor for too long begins to take a serious toll on them. They need to resolve the issue quickly. Meanwhile, Rudra gradually reveals its true form, and both heroes are trapped inside a gigantic rose. Inside this place, they encounter Daomon, who is completely consumed by darkness. He tries to tempt Raiku into embracing the darkness as well. Eventually, Raiku escapes from the flower, but he is now a completely different being, seemingly possessed by the armor. Unlike the last time this happened, he remains conscious in this state and uses this superior power to strike the enemy. With a new ability called Flowers of the Oath, Raiku gains wings that allow him to reach the enemy's weak points more quickly. Now that he is inside the enemy, Raiku spots Daomon in the distance and tries to attack him, but the sorcerer is much faster. With arrogance, Daomon claims that no power can defeat him now, but this is a lie. Raiku summons an immense amount of light and, with this power, delivers a fatal blow to the enemy. Now that the enemy is vulnerable, Kaguya casts the spell to seal Rudra. Together, both knights protect Kaguya so she can complete the spell, managing to cut off the monster's limbs and paralyze its attacks, rendering all its efforts useless. The spell finally takes effect, the threat is eliminated, and Rudra returns to where it came from, once again sealed within the moon. Kaguya decides to depart, but not before letting her allies know that she will always be watching over them. They now witness how the capital is completely devastated, but at least they manage to eliminate the most urgent threat. Raiku sees hope in the situation, believing that the capital will return to its former state. Just when it seemed everything was over, Daomon resurfaces once more to threaten the lives of the heroes. As he approaches, Raiku has no choice but to strike him down with his sword to protect the others. Before Daomon falls to the ground, Seimei catches him and vows to bear his darkness. At last, he is defeated, marking the end of the final threat to everyone.